Hi, I'm Tammy Erickson. Do you ever wonder about why you do the things you do within your organization? Where did your organizational design come from? Where did the practices that you follow every day originate? Most of us have been part of organizations that have undergone some kind of change, from a geographic organization to a functional one to a product-based organization. Maybe you're in the middle of a big complex matrix. So we're used to rethinking on those dimensions. But I'd like to challenge you today to think even a little more specifically about some of the practices, the specific ways that you go about getting things done and the leadership behaviors that you use within your organization. Every organization is challenged to do something different. The environment that we're in creates a specific question that we have to be able to answer at any point in time. And the companies that do that successfully, that are able to rise to the challenge of the new question and put in place practices that are just right for accomplishing that, to lead in ways that are completely appropriate to meeting that challenge, are the ones that I like to call iconic. They're the ones that stand out in our memories when we think back on different time periods about the companies that we admired the most. Think for a minute about automobile manufacture. Did you know there were hundreds of companies that made automobiles back in the early 1900s? Well, there were, but in fact, most people only remember a couple of those companies as being the iconic standouts. Why? Well, most of the companies were assembling cars in the way that they would have assembled, let's say, a buggy. They put the pieces together manually. They thought about it in a single discrete product kind of an approach. But the question that was lingering on the horizon at that time was, how could we make a lot of automobiles at a very consistent quality and at a cost that would be low enough that everyone could afford to own one? Quantity, quality, cost. Those were the big questions, not how to make an automobile. Lots of people could do that, but how to make it in those ways. And of course, the companies that solved that, Ford, for example, with the assembly line, are the ones that we tend to remember as the iconic companies of the automobile industry. Here's another example. Think about books. Well, we've known how to make books for hundreds of years, and so making books isn't new and selling books isn't new. But in recent years, the iconic question that people were challenged to solve was, how can we make books widely available, quickly available to people in many different forms? And of course, companies like Amazon that solved that using social media techniques, the evolving technology, the ability, for example, to rank and recommend, as well as new kinds of transportation modes, all of those coming together to make Amazon an iconic company. Not because they knew how to make books, but because they solved the big question surrounding books at that point in time. As we look back in history, we can get a lot of lessons from thinking about what the iconic question was that different companies solved at different points in time, and look at the practices that they followed to achieve those goals. In my role as an adjunct professor at London Business School, I've designed and direct a program called Leading Businesses into the Future. One of the big issues that we address in that program is thinking about the practices and the leadership behaviors in particular that are most appropriate for the challenges companies face today. I believe that the companies that will become iconic today are ones that in one way or another wrestle with the question of what I call leveraging intelligence, figuring out how to use the intelligence of the world broadly, of the individuals who come in contact with the organization to achieve an advantage. That requires things like the ability to put ideas together through innovation, to tap into people's own inner desire to contribute through the tapping of discretionary effort, to create environments in which sharing ideas or collaborating is something that's easy to do. So the question becomes, what kinds of practices would make sense in this environment? And even more importantly, what kinds of practices do we no longer need that are perhaps holdovers from a time past? To explore that, in the program, we spend a day at the Science Museum and at the Victoria and Albert Museum here in London. And we spend time thinking about different businesses over different periods of time, the challenges that they would face, what it would have felt like to be a leader of those businesses at that point in time. And we come to understand some of the practices that evolved by the companies that were most successful, and which of those practices have applicability today. That's what I'd like to share with you in some upcoming videos. I'll share with you some of the vignettes of businesses that we study in the program and some of the conclusions that we come to about the practices that worked best. Look forward to talking further.